morning. It's so nice to see those of you in person with us today, and welcome to our virtual guests. My name is Tammy Trojanowski, and I'm the director of the town's Community and Senior Services. June is Brain Health and Alzheimer's Awareness Month, and it is critical to understand how to ensure best quality outcomes for our community. In fact, in Connecticut, we are number 7 in having the largest percentage of older adults that live in our state. And we know that Alzheimer's is expected to double in the coming years. Today, we are going to learn about Athomeness, thanks to our friends with Griswold Home Care. The Baldwin Center is home to senior services, and we strive to be the community home for our Stratford's older adults. And our home is currently getting a facelift, from the basement to the second floor, getting a fresh coat of paint, new flooring, and some amazing lighting. And we will have one room open very soon, and we cannot wait to open the entire center to our community, back to their beloved home. On a personal note, we think about Athomeness and how that is going to be important for us when we open up. Mayor Hoydick is disappointed that she's unable to be here today. Governor Lamont and the Commissioner of DOT are here in town, and they're at the train station right now at a press conference. So our mayor is with the governor, but she would certainly welcome you to our community home, Stratford Town Hall. We're really pleased to be here in the beautiful council chambers, we are, again, just so grateful to Griswold for sharing their expertise over the past 30 years, and they're always working to be cutting edge on resources to ensure that we have the best quality of life for Fairfield County. So please join me in welcoming Kathy Howard, Director of Griswold.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, everyone, for being here today, and thank you to the Facebook Live audience. In particular, I want to say howdy to our home office in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, as well as Filosa and Hancock Hall in Danbury. We know you're out there, and we know you're watching. Thank you. I also want to thank Mayor Hoydick, the Stratford Senior Services, and the Alzheimer's Association for partnering in today's event. Having grown up in Stratford, cultivating a home care agency, elevating life for seniors for over 30 years, it's a perfect venue to share today's programming of Athomeness for those with dementia in Fairfield County. Roughly 75% of our practice is centered around elevating lives of those who suffer from dementia. We train our caregivers to handle this by understanding warning signs, infusing care plans with attention to homeness factors, which Dr. Maloney will address today as part of her patient-centered, holistic approach to care. Beyond keeping our clients safe, we count on success by elevating our clients' lives through what we call Griswold moments. We came across Dr. Maloney's work. We recognized that her construct of Athomeness codified our approach in a way that would be helpful to our entire community as we wrap our arms around our seniors. It fills us with an urgency to share her learnings with the community, for it will help sensitize all of us who struggle with those with Alzheimer's and dementia, and how we can understand and meet them where they are in a more healing community environment. The Alzheimer's Association also saw the merit of this work, and we're happy to have Maria Tomasetti here today, Director of Education and Programming, who can translate this work for application to help Alzheimer's and dementia patients. Dr. Maloney will share her construct of Athomeness and what it is, how to recognize it, and why it matters. We will then spend some time in a panel discussion regarding the applications of Athomeness with input from Erin McLeod, Director of Social Work for our Senior Center, Maria Tomasetti, followed by Q&A with Dr. Maloney to be sure to jot down your questions. With that, I'd like to turn this over to Beth Moeller, who enthusiastically brought Dr. Maloney's work to our agency, and she will engage us in a discussion to help you better understand Dr. Maloney's work. Beth?
Thank you, Kathy. It is a thrill to be here today. Today is the longest day. It is the beginning of summer solstice, so happy summer, everyone. Actually, it began last night. And it is a day where we shine light upon the need for a cure for Alzheimer's and dementia. And so as we, as Gridgewald, celebrated our 30th anniversary, what better way to bring that to life than to shine a light on a situation that so many of our clients deal with. And we constantly look for ways to elevate life for our seniors. And in doing so, we search for different constructs, different tools, different treatments, and that work took us to Dr. Maloney. When I learned of Dr. Maloney's work, I immediately turned to the Senior Center, Senior Services here in Stratford to see this work seems so important. How can we get it out? And Erin raised her hand. And so I would like at this point to just share, if Erin can take the mic and explain what you saw as so important and how people might be able to think about this work as we present it today.
Okay. Thank you, Beth. I've been with the town of Stratford for almost 8 years now, and the first 7 years of my work was primarily direct service with people who had some level of a cognitive impairment, be it Alzheimer's or another related dementia. And so it's always been a population that is near and dear to my heart. And, you know, when Beth talked about Dr. Maloney's concept of at-homeness, I really thought it was such a great opportunity for professionals to really learn about this disease and also how to provide the population who is living with this disease with a dementia-friendly community, professionals and civil servants who are knowledgeable and understanding of the disease and what we can do to make this a community that they feel safe and at home in.
Perfect. So with that enthusiastic response, here we are today sitting at the chamber of the Stratford Town Hall. It's the most impressive building. If any of you have never been here, come visit. And we have the pleasure of introducing our distinguished guest. So Dr. Maloney is quite an impressive lady, and I was delighted to come upon her work. Dr. Maloney has had 33 years of clinical experience as a nurse practitioner in gerontology. And on top of that, she also has a specialty in both quantitative and qualitative and mixed research techniques as they relate to studying factors of quality of life. And she came upon Athomeness, I believe, in her work as a doctorate student, and it continued to empower her passion for gerontology through her years. She has taken that to a variety of applications and collaborations, including the work with the National Alzheimer's Association, the LinkAD think tank, empowering partners as a co-researcher at Quinnipiac University, the Interpersonal Coalition for Aging and Inclusive Leadership. To that add that Dr. Maloney is a professor at Quinnipiac University, a fellow at the Gerontological Society of America, a fellow at the American Academy of Nursing, and a research advisor to the Alzheimer's Association, and an instructor to the Friends of Dementia. And so I couldn't think of a more impressive and enlightened individual to bring fresh thinking to the field of Alzheimer's and dementia on this longest day. And so with that, I would like to kick off and begin our conversation. So this has been a long time in the making, so thank you all who have joined us today. I know there are several different disciplines in the room, and I know there are several different audiences out there on social airwaves, and it is our hope that as you listen to this conversation, that you come away with at least one action step that you may wish to take to better learn about Alzheimer's and dementia and how to create a more inclusive, dementia-friendly community for the people in your constituencies. And so I thought we would start by beginning at the beginning. Maybe before we get into depth in any of this, you can just share generally what is Alzheimer's dementia, what's the difference, and just lay some basic groundwork for how we can begin to think about this work today.
Sure, thank you, and thank you so much for that kind introduction. I'm not sure I recognized that person, but I do appreciate it. And Beth and Kathy and everyone here, thank you so much for the groundwork that you have laid and for organizing this very important event. When I heard about Griswold moments, I thought, wow, these folks are already applying my theory and they don't know my theory yet. So this was really a match that was meant to be. So let me begin. Many of you here have more expertise than I in Alzheimer's disease and related dementia, but for some folks in the audience that maybe you're new to this topic, let me just say that dementia is not really a diagnosis. It's really more of a collection of symptoms. It's a syndrome, meaning that there are many different paths that may lead to these symptoms. And Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia. And you know, we're familiar with the term disability and physical disability. Dementia is a cognitive disability, which means that the things that our brains would normally do when they're in full health, we struggle with when we have dementia. In Alzheimer's disease, that most commonly is memory, and particularly short-term memory and learning new things. But it may also be other things that our brain normally would do, such as finding our way to familiar places or spaces. So when we have Alzheimer's disease or related dementia, we might get lost trying to navigate to a familiar place or space. And I might say, just as a little preview, a little teaser here, that it is difficult to feel at home in a place that we are lost in and do not recognize. So that's just a teaser for the theory.
Perfect.
And I would invite any of my colleagues in the Alzheimer's Association or others to add to that definition.
So is there anything you would like to say as we kick off? Perfect, perfect. So that brings us to this concept of at-homeness. So as a home care agency, of course, I gravitated immediately, at-homeness. And then I learned it's a lot more than being at home. So can you kick off and tell us, it's an unusual word. What is at-home?
It is an unusual word, isn't it? You probably haven't heard the term at-homeness before. So what I'd like you to do for a moment, everyone in this room and in our virtual audience, and behind the camera, please close your eyes for a moment and imagine a place where you felt truly and deeply at home. And I want you to think about the words that come up for you when you are imagining this place. And think about the feelings that come up for you. Next, I want you to imagine a slightly different experience, but again, close your eyes and imagine a relationship where you have said, I feel at home with this person. I feel at home with these people. What is that like? What feelings are coming up? And lastly, I want you to now imagine an experience where you lost track of time and where you felt a deep sense of peace and a connection to something that is timeless. What was that experience? You don't have to share the experience, but think of the feelings. And now you can open your eyes. If anyone would care to, if you would care to share some of the feelings or experiences, and I'll begin with the first thing that I asked, which was a place where you felt truly and deeply at home. What kinds of words or feelings came up for you?
Peace.
Peace? Comfy. Warmth. Safe. Any others? How about when I asked, I feel at home with this person. I feel at home with these people. What came to mind?
Trust.
Trust. Relaxed.
Cozy.
Cozy.
Genuine.
Genuine. Authentic. My own word that keeps coming up is acceptance also.
And safe.
Safe. Safe has come up in two contexts now, both safe in a place and safe with other people. I want to come back to that. And then lastly, I asked you to imagine an experience where you lost track of time and you felt a deep sense of peace and a connection to something that was timeless. You can share the experience or you can share words or feelings.
Engaged.
Engaged. Nature. Free. Meditative.
Higher power.
Higher power. Yeah. So we think about the terms, the words, and the feelings that we all just expressed. Those are experiences of at-homeness. That is what at-homeness is. It isn't a physical place or space. It isn't a building. It isn't a constructed environment. Now, it is most easy to experience at-homeness for many of us when we are in a particular space, place, or physical environment. Why is that? Because for many of us, our homes, where we were raised, or the homes where we raise our families, or the homes that we are with loved others, have many of those qualities that we just talked about. When we are inside of those places or spaces, we often feel safe, comfortable, familiar, relaxed, at peace, engaged. So that physical space or place, then we start investing meaning into that place and space. And guess what? It radiates that meaning back to us. It says, oh yes, I belong to you. And you say, oh yes, I belong to this place and space. And you share an identity that Graham Rolls, as a researcher, has referred to as place identity. It is part of you, and you are part of it. But that built environment isn't what my theory is about, that one single space. My theory is about how do we create small experiences of at-homeness for people who perhaps have lost some of that peace and connection and sense of safety and timelessness. How do we help to create Griswold moments, if I can borrow that term, in creating small experiences of home?
Wow. So I hope that brought it to life for all of you. It did, certainly for me. So I wonder if that's what at-homeness is. Can you maybe tell us what it isn't?
Yeah. So it isn't static. It isn't a single thing. I either am at home or I am not, because it changes throughout our lives. As our places and spaces change, as our relationships with other people change, and as we experience losses in our life. If we lose physical function or we lose cognitive function, we may lose our way a little bit along the way. So home isn't static. It's not either there or it isn't. It's dynamic. So home is both an experience but also a process. And we have to keep maintaining that process of finding who we are within each experience. Who am I as a person with, maybe we have diabetes. Who am I as a person with diabetes? Who am I as a person with cancer? Who am I as a person with Alzheimer's disease? I have to re-establish that sense of at-homeness within this new experience. And again, small experiences of home can help to create that larger process.
It's so interesting because at Griswold, we ran a program in 2020 using the StoryCorps format to speak with seniors and have them share their experiences to help navigate these kind of turbulent times. And one of the things they talked about was how important it is to continue to evolve. Across every story, there was that notion of evolution. But then you turn to people with Alzheimer's and dementia, and perhaps you can help us understand how can they continue to evolve with some of the memory impairment issues to be able to experience that sense of at-homeness.
I want to talk about the different elements of the experience of at-homeness first. It has, according to my work, my qualitative research primarily, I synthesized many different qualitative research studies about the meaning of home to older adults. And I identified 4 key elements of the meaning of home as an experience. And then I want to talk about home as a process and how we can help people to maintain and reestablish and create home. So home as an experience has 4 key elements: empowerment, refuge, relationship, and self-reconciliation. And I want to explain each of those because right now they're just words. So the first important element of at-homeness is empowerment, a sense of power. In all of the qualitative research, home is where I'm the boss. Home is where I make choices. I have control. I have a sense of I'm involved in the decision making. It's my space. I have a sense of ownership as well. So that's power, right? That's empowerment. And in the person-centered care movement or the culture change movement, you see a lot of emphasis on the notion of choice. And choice is certainly very important, and it is a component of power or empowerment, but it isn't the only component. There is freedom, the freedom to come and go, the freedom to have things around me that are of value to me, but also the sense of mastery or feeling useful or making a contribution. Participants in some research studies said, you know, this place needs me. They really need me. I can share my talents with others. I can share my recipes with others. I can share my gifts or my ideas with others. I can make a contribution. So feeling useful is part of empowerment. So choice, control, freedom, feeling useful, and making a contribution are all part of empowerment. So if we think about how do we help people to experience success and mastery and feeling useful, that's how we help empower people. Even small experiences of contribution, small experiences of success, participation. The next concept is refuge, and this is an interesting one. Everyone said safety. Almost everyone thought about safety when they thought about at-homeness. Absolutely. At-homeness is a place where we are not violated or intruded upon. Now, there are many ways to be violated and intruded upon, not just, so we don't think about just physical safety. We think about emotional safety, spiritual safety, our sense of selfhood, our sense of dignity. It's important that we not intrude upon those things as well. So the sense of refuge is a safe place. It's a place that has a boundary. The inside of it is mine. Outside is where strangers are. People I love can come inside this boundary. And it's a place where I'm safe, not only physically safe, but where my selfhood is respected and protected. And the cherished objects and my cherished possessions are respected and protected as well, if they are part of who I am. So that is refuge. Oftentimes we recognize a refuge more when we leave it and then come back. So if we go out into a hostile world, or we go out into bad weather, or we go out into a strange place or a strange territory where we get lost, and then we come back to the place that's comforting, familiar, dry, warm, relaxing, oh, that's a refuge now. But if we never leave, ever, then that becomes a prison rather than a refuge. And that's a recurring theme in some of the research that I conducted, that people who are not able to leave do not feel at home. And some of that, interestingly enough, doesn't come up in the geriatric literature, but even in literature of mothers caring for severely disabled children. If they're never able to leave, they're never able to get a respite from that, then they may not feel at home in their physical home.
So interesting.
So refuge involves journeying and returning. Relationship is such a critical part of at-homeness. Feeling at home with people that you trust, with people that know you, with people that know your story, with people that care about you, care for you, that you care about and care for. Relationships are a key element of at-homeness. So caring spaces and caring experiences are experiences that honor what's important and valuable to us, including our loved others. And that might be loved pets as well. It might also be cherished possessions. Our possessions sometimes are important to us because of their symbolism, not just because of their things. And I often give the example of a coffee mug that I have that I use every morning, and it fits me so well. It's got a place for my thumb right here. I'm picturing it right now. It's pottery. It was given to me by someone that I love during a trip that we took together. So it's just by drinking coffee. First of all, coffee's a favorite beverage. But just by drinking that 1 cup of coffee out of that mug, it's connecting me physically, tactile, taste, sense, smell, but to someone I love, and remembering an experience that we had together, all in that 1 cup. So I just use that as an example. But there are many times where cherished possessions become an important part of relationship, not only relationship to people. And sometimes it's relationship to valued ideas or symbols. And that's something we can talk about further. I mean, the example, unfortunately, that I sometimes use for that is that when the World Trade Center came down, it wasn't just that we lost a building. It's that we lost a symbol of something that was very important. So it's a relationship to something, someone that is important to us. That is relationship. So empowering refuge of relationship and self-reconciliation. What on earth is self-reconciliation? When I'm in an experience of at-homeness, I am known as a unique individual. You know me, and you know the meaning of me. And I have to keep navigating that and maybe re-narrating that. I have to keep telling my own story because, as you said, the meaning of me is not static, it's evolving. I reserve the right to change and to evolve. And so it's helpful for me to keep retelling my story. And sometimes I recognize myself when I retell that story. But again, if I have a loss, if I have a stroke, let's say, and I suddenly can't do the things that I took for granted that I was always able to do, or if I have a cognitive disability and I can't do some of the things anymore that are important to me and valuable to me, I have to get comfortable with myself again. I have to go through a process of self-reconciliation. So those are the 4 elements of at-homeness as an experience. And then, as I mentioned, at-homeness is a process, and I just want to explain briefly a process to you. It starts with closing one door and opening another. So when we have a major transition, we often have to grieve the loss first. We have to close one door before we can open the other and be open to a new experience and a new way of being and a new self. I may not accept myself with a new disability quite yet. I may need to grieve the old me first. So grief work is extremely important and undervalued as part of the process. I also have to make sure that door stays closed to experiences of not homeness, which means I have to protect against intrusion and violation, to have a little bit of protection there. And then the second part of the process, Heather Young's work talked about a process of nesting. When we're building a home, we're nesting. We are personalizing a space. We are putting some of the things that we think are important there. But also, we're creating a place where we can care for others. where we can welcome the people that we care about or the things that we care about into that space and share it with them and prepare it for them. And then we have experiences together in that space. So that's part of the process, creating a home, sharing a home, protecting a home, part of the process. And then the final part of the process is that the meaning of me moves forward. I have something to look forward to. A gentleman that I interviewed was talking about, you mentioned nature earlier, and for me, nature often brings me to a timeless experience, for me personally. And a gentleman that I was interviewing said, I'm so looking forward to those bushes blooming in the spring. He was looking forward to that. And that was an experience of something that was important to him moving forward. It was a small thing, but it brought joy. You could tell it lit up his eyes. How do you know when you've created an experience of at-homeness? Someone's eyes light up. That's how you know. When they talk about it, their eyes light up. You don't even have to necessarily bring them there. Just get them talking about it. If you see those eyes lighting up, you have hit upon it. And sometimes you hit upon it by accident. Terrific. That's okay. Serendipity is good. I was interviewing someone once, and she took me to the end of a hallway in a nursing home, and she was someone who had moderate stages of Alzheimer's disease. And the staff thought that I wasn't even going to be able to interview her, that she wouldn't be able to give me any story at all. And by the way, that's usually almost never the case. There's always a story. I just make sure that I'm open to the story the person wants to tell. She brought me to the end of the hallway, and we were looking out the window, and she told me this beautiful story of a ladybug that had landed on that window the day before. And she told me like the story of the ladybug's life. And it was so beautiful, and it was so poetic, and I was enraptured. Wow. And it wasn't what I was necessarily there to interview her about, and it was just richer than anything that I could have gotten with my interview guide. It was being present in the moment.
That's really beautiful.
And I'll end there, because we have time for questions later.
Yes, but I'm very intrigued with this notion of a process and an evolution, and I just want to say thank you so much for the rich way you brought that to life. Even having studied some of your work, it furthered my own understanding, so thank you. You know, many in this room represent our town and our town services, and so there are so many different settings that we can think about at-homeness, whether it's residential, whether it's enrichment through the senior centers, whether it's through nursing care in the instance of some of the medical or some of our legal issues that we have to deal with in crisis moments. And so can you just give us a sense in a crisis moment how at-homeness comes to life?
So I think the work of, I'm going to reference the work of Zingmark, Norberg, and Sandman, and you can tell I'm an academic because I do things like that. But they actually studied people that had Alzheimer's disease, and they were interested in looking at what was going on when folks were searching for home. And you know, sometimes people have difficulty with wandering or with getting lost, or often in different settings you'll hear people say, I want to go home, I want to go home. And many of us who are professional caregivers are thinking about a community dwelling, right? If I have to bring them to this house. But oftentimes if you bring them to that house, they may not recognize that house because that wasn't the home that they were looking for. They were looking for an experience where they felt familiar and safe and recognized and valued. So I think in a time of crisis, it's very important that we help people feel comforted, recognized, valued, accepted, a sense of trust, that sense of relationship and refuge. Not necessarily about a physical place or space or building. So I would just say that to begin with.
That's great. And so that's still a fairly abstract concept. And so I want you all to know that in your packets, and for anyone interested in our virtual world, just simply send us a message. You will have a construct of what these different at-homeness factors are. You will have questions that you can ask someone to help identify if they're safe, if they're feeling all of these different things that Dr. Maloney spoke about. And you'll see examples from our own experience at Griswold. We call them Griswold moments, where you take someone from kind of where they are in not at home and bring them to this more elevated place of homeness. But at this point, we have such expertise on our panel. I'm hoping that we might be able to turn to our team here and find out how this work might inform some shifts in thinking for their organizations. And so maybe we can begin with Maria.
Thank you. As I'm listening more carefully, Dr. Maloney, to your model, what's coming to my mind is that, as you know, we have the person-centered care model through the Alzheimer's Association, and I see this as a deepening, a way to deepen understanding, I think, of the person-centered care model when we're working with our professional caregivers, and also when we're working with our family caregivers to help them better understand what that means. You know, we have some terms, but not the direct model that you have developed. And I also come to mind, in addition to my Alzheimer's work, of my personal caregiver experience, since I was the family caregiver for both of my parents over a 21-year period with Alzheimer's, in particular with my dad, who was a 15-year journey, and my most recent caregiving was with him. And just some examples that come to mind, and again, I had not heard of Athomeness, but some of the examples bring to mind, you know, how do we make someone feel at home, or help caregivers to balance some of those almost, it seems often to be conflicting things going on at the same time. And earlier in his journey with mild cognitive impairment, my dad was able to very safely engage in a senior center with the independence and autonomy. He did that because he found great joy in an Italian class that was there. I think sometimes he thought he was the instructor, even though he was not. And that worked well. I mean, that was the hook actually to get him to go to a senior center, since he thought he was a young man at 86, and why would he ever even go there in the first place? But when he actually was there, he loved it. And then we learned over time, he told me that, you know, he tried to walk home from the senior center, you know, and he was taking rides from people he didn't know. And we realized it was no longer safe for him to be able to self-navigate. And we were able, this particular senior center had a respite care program for people with an early dementia. So we were able to sort of engage him in there. So he was still able to take the bus to the senior center, but they were then able to ensure his safety there, and they continued, you know, escorting him to that Italian class. So what brought him joy, the relationships in that group were still there with him. Just fast forward, I'll just mention when we then ended up in a place where I was still trying to balance work with the caregiving. And clear was that he was not safe at home alone, even though he did not realize that. And that was due to his changes in cognition. So we kind of had, you know, I wanted to introduce in-home care, and he was a very, I guess I'll use the words, fiercely independent person. That's the, you know, empowerment, you know, and I'll probably be just like him when I, you know, eventually. But he would say repeatedly, I don't need help, I don't need care, you know, I'm fine, you know, and yet I knew that he needed care. So we tried to come up with strategies, and eventually it was a strategy that, you know, part of it was he was going to be helping me by having someone just keep him company. So it gave me peace of mind. And it worked a little bit, but then the key thing was finding in the relationship end the right person. And we did end up with a male caregiver, and, you know, again, it was a professional relationship, certainly, but we introduced it as friendship. My father accepted it because it was friendship, and they became friends. You know, they would go for walks together, which is what he would love to do. Otherwise, he was walking all over town without my knowing where he was and being safe. So I think, in a way, without knowing the empowerment, similar to the Griswold moments, you know, even in my private caregiving experiences, there are those and Homeness concepts that were embedded into that. So I don't know if that helps at all. Yeah.
One thing that Maria shared with me is how unpredictable Alzheimer's and dementia can be. And so you go from being in a place with someone, and I mean place in space, not physically, where you feel like you understand them, you're one-on-one, and then all of a sudden they become something different. And how frustrating and demoralizing that is as a family member or a caregiver. And this construct gives you a checklist to say, okay, I can see that light's no longer on in their eyes. I can see they're getting frustrated. Where are we going awry? Is it safety? Is it self-destiny? Is it, refuge? Is it relationship? And you can almost go down this little checklist of this construct to help identify how to adjust your relationship and your care. Kathy, perhaps you can tell us an example within the world of Griswold where you have seen how this construct can be helpful.
Sure. So let's talk about the factor or the elements of participation. So a female client with a female caregiver trying to find something that they could do together that would be exciting for her. And she had a creative outlet, and they found a ceramics class. And so together, they would attend this ceramics class, and it was very clear to the caregiver that this was something that was really exciting for her client. She was so thrilled. She said, "Oh my gosh, this has been the best day ever. The second best day is when we go shopping." So that was just just a piece of the participation. Doing something that she felt that she could do and be really good at. A second factor, an element of contribution, is a client who was seeing some dark days, and his caregiver, Eugene, was searching for something that they could do. And so they went to Walmart, bought a bunch of blankets, and they put them in bags with other items and went down to the local soup kitchen and handed them out to the homeless. And it was something that the caregiver and the client really, really enjoyed. And again, he felt a sense of contribution. Just recently, I had a counseling session with a very dear friend of mine who's now residing in Florida. They moved her mom to an assisted living to be closer to her and her sisters. And she was having difficulty with the fact that her mother was not participating in physical therapy. She wasn't participating in her transfers, and that she was no longer really able to do that. And so I said, "Listen, Marcia," I said, you have to give your mom the ability to make her own decisions. She still has moments of clarity, and if she doesn't want to get up anymore because it's too painful and you've tried everything, you need to be able to allow her to make these decisions herself, as long as they're safe decisions and that you've tried everything. And so giving her mom the ability to make that decision, although it was a difficult decision to make, was extremely empowering for her mom. It was hard for the girls, but they knew that they had tried everything.
Thank you. Those are great examples. I started to challenge myself when we thought about this and thought, well, we're going to be talking to folks in the town, so if there was a crisis and an ambulance was going to pick up someone with dementia or Alzheimer's, how might that EMT consider this construct, for example? So, not being an EMT, I was just thinking, well, maybe they don't just have one color blanket in the ambulance anymore. Maybe it's a white blanket and a yellow blanket, and when they're greeted at the home, they'll say, would you like a yellow blanket, which blanket would you like? All of a sudden, immediately, they have some sense of self-destiny or control. So not saying that this is what we should do, but just an example of how I, in my mind, thought, this is a new way of thinking about each of our disciplines, and is there some way we can make them more comfortable? And so, Erin, you are on the front lines with our community. Perhaps you can give us a sense, how might you see this being integrated, and can it elevate some level of care in those more difficult situations that you encounter?
You know, I definitely think that Dr. Maloney's theory has relevance to, you know, all different professionals in all different fields, whether you work for the health department, whether you're an attorney, whether you are emergency responders, whether you work at the local senior center. I think that, you know, from listening to Dr. Maloney and also from Maria, you know, and Kathy as well, you know, I think that acknowledging the person as an individual is always a great place to start. Learning somebody's name, using their name when you're speaking to them, asking questions, asking for engagement rather than giving directive, you know, offers that feeling of safety, that feeling of being respected, that feeling of having choices. You know, I think that that's, you know, so what we're so anxiously looking to get back to is seeing the faces of our seniors and making that reconnection visually, emotionally, returning to being a place of home for them, you know, and creating those relationships. Obviously, we have a different advantage in that we have time over time to create those relationships, whereas somebody who's coming in more of a crisis situation doesn't have that luxury of time. But even in those small moments of recognizing, you know, what can I do to make this person feel more comfortable? You know, I think that those are points that everybody in this room can utilize. Recognizing that even though they may be impaired or less able than they used to be, the acknowledgement that they do still have the ability to make choices and that they are still owed respect as an individual, it gets you far. It really does.
I love that sense of personalization that you spoke about, and frankly, that's something we can all do with each other. I don't know if you guys have been feeling over the last 2 weeks when we're all beginning to get back to normal and the pace of things is just like on, like that sense of really recognizing someone else's and their individuality as opposed to your agenda has really, I think, come to the forefront. Tammy, do you have any other thoughts before we open this up to?
You know, one of the things that I keep thinking about in this discussion is that don't we all want to feel at home? Don't we all want to have that homeness? I mean, it's not just for people afflicted with Alzheimer's disease and dementia. It's what we all want. And it also reminded me of what Maya Angelou has said, that we might not remember what someone says or what someone does. It's what we remember, how they make us feel. And I just think that's such a great message of how are we interacting with people? How are we caring for people? So in whatever moment, whatever, kind of whoever, but I think that what we've seen is how powerful this can be. And I just would like to add as well that it's great to hear from people from academia, because having that research up on a shelf doesn't help us in the field. So to have the opportunity to understand your research and then think about how does this make sense in our work with people day to day. So really appreciate that, and it's certainly given us a lot to think about as we continue to move forward to getting our Baldwin Center back open again at full speed.
That's wonderful. Yes, please.
Just a couple of points that I wanted to make. One of the issues of safety is also physiologic safety. So the nurse in me feels the need to say that if someone is experiencing a crisis, it's very important that we rule out medical conditions that may be contributing to that crisis as well. Because we may do all the right things in terms of trying to help that person to feel safe and comfortable, but if they are experiencing a delirium, for example, because they have an infection or heart failure, and I certainly have encountered that many times in my career where people were treating someone only with psychosocial measures when in fact the person's blood sugar was very low and they really needed some glucose. So a medical evaluation is always in order. The nurse in me feels the need to say that as well. And I did want to point out the value of rituals as well, because we didn't have a chance to talk about that rituals can be very comforting and can help someone with difficult transitions. And we don't really have rituals for many of the transitions that we experience in life, particularly as older adults, or particularly if we're facing a cognitive disability. So there is a book called Transitional Keys, and I've brought a copy of it with me. It's by Andrea Sherman, and I've forgotten the co-author's name, but I will come up with that soon. And it's called Transitional Keys, and it's just a book of ideas of how to create rituals. And it was written, I think, with transition to assisted living or long-term care facilities in mind, but some of the rituals that are in there can be done in home care as well. And I think that having predictability and familiarity in the sense of ritual can be comforting. So I think that's something that we can think about that's tangible. And then I just wanted to end by saying thank you. Andrea Sherman and Marcia Weiner, who is a rabbi, so they wrote it together. Actually, it has a certain spirituality to it, so that sense of sort of connecting to something transcendent. Why did I focus in on Athomeness? When I started my doctoral research, I thought I was going to do a study that had something to do with quality of life. I went into my doctoral program saying, yes, I'm doing research about quality of life. And when I tried to wrap my arms around that, I just didn't know what it meant. And the more literature I read about quality of life, the more confused I got. But when I read David Seaman's work, he was the first one who used this term Athomeness. I thought, oh, I know how to help someone feel at home. If someone comes to me in crisis, I know how to make them feel welcome, comfortable, safe. I know what I would do for that person, and I know that I would cook something that I knew that they liked. And I would try to have things in their environment that I knew that were important to them. And it resonated with me immediately. And so that's why I have focused on Athomeness. So if you remember nothing else, and you don't remember what are the concepts of Athomeness, that's fine. But remember that when you closed your eyes and you thought about an experience of home, how can you help someone else center themselves within an experience like that? That's what I would.
Thank you. Thank you for that beautiful summary. Let's just open it up quickly. Are there any questions or comments from this esteemed audience? You all work with different groups. Yes.
Thank you, and that's something that I want to give additional thought to, is about how do you help establish Athomeness in crisis and in disaster. I do want to mention that as part of the preparation for this event, I took some of the Alzheimer's Association trainings, actually, and I wanted to do the one that was for EMTs, and I noticed that they have a link for disaster preparedness on there. So there's some nice little miniature trainings, and thank you, Alzheimer's Association, for all that hard work. And just a wonderful training. I really enjoyed the EMT training very much, not being an EMT. So, but the reason why that came to mind is that part of establishing Athomeness is, for some people, making a choice of colors would be important, and for other people it wouldn't be important at all. And so salience or importance, or what matters to that person, is elevated to the top. In addition to, yes, there's empowerment, and yes, there's refuge, and yes, there's relationship, what matters most is what matters most to that person. And for me, maybe let me bring my coffee mug to the shelter, or maybe not, because it'll get damaged or lost there, so we want to keep it safe. So maybe we don't want that, but maybe a picture of it. Or, you know what I mean? Something that matters most to me, that is familiar to me, but that we can keep safe and protected. And that is challenging, isn't it, to think about? But I bet you have a group of professionals that could brainstorm together about.
Indeed, and we're trying to work within the regional emergency preparedness region, basically Fairfield County, to look at the vulnerable populations, and certainly those with memory impairment, would be part of that. So yeah, we're trying.
And I love the variety of offerings that you have also, of activities, because as you mentioned, activities is often a way that we connect to at Homeness. But for one person, it might be the ceramics class, and for one, it might be the Italian class. And for me, you might let me pretend like I'm teaching somebody something. That would make me really happy.
Those are wonderful. Go ahead.
Yes, hi, I'm Max Rosenberg. I'm the probate judge for Stratford, Connecticut. We're dealing with people in various stages of what you're describing all the time. I love this idea of at-homeness. I particularly like this chart that's behind you that I'm going to definitely be utilizing soon. But I was wondering, I read somewhere recently in a study that the olfactory sense, your sense of smell, is tied to some of your deepest memories and can possibly be that kind of bridge to this concept of at-homeness. I was wondering if there had been any thought or any action towards bringing the smells of home towards some of our people in town.
Yeah, some of my research has been done in greenhouse or small house nursing homes, which are nursing homes that are purposely built from the ground up to invoke experiences of home. And one of the strategies that they use is they have an open kitchen so that the people that live there can smell the aromas of the meals cooking. And so I think that's an interesting notion, because smells can connect us sometimes to a different point in time or to a memory. The other thing that can connect us sometimes is music. You've probably heard of the Music and Memory Project, which can connect us to other times, other people. So the arts, any sensory experiences, nature, those are all sometimes transitional keys, really, that can help us. So I love that idea, and I see you're brainstorming already of wonderful ideas. Unfortunately, sometimes some types of dementia affect the olfactory sense, and they actually diminish the sense of smell. So it is good for the people who can smell, and sometimes it's weakened. So that's.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Larry Ciccarelli. I'm Director of Public Safety for the town of Stratford and the Emergency Management Director. I'm really happy to see Max here. I think it's a good spot for him to pick up things. But, my job is to help people and help the town. And, me and all my departments, we have great empathy for people, and people with mental impairment and so forth. But until you live through it, all this great dialogue we're having is just dialogue. I've lived through 5 years with dementia, Alzheimer's, and my father, who just passed away a couple weeks ago. It was horrendous near the end. My mother's going through that now. So on top of that empathy that I have for people is that I've lived it myself. So all the stuff you were talking about is stuff that we figured out along the way by making it up. It's because we loved our parents, and this is kind of part of my job. But to be able to quantify that in a structure for interesting, because without that, we just kind of made it ad hoc. And the techniques that were used at different stages of the dementia are very appropriate, because the self-choice at an early stage is a lot different than the self-choice at a later stage. So it's, I learned a lot in the last 5 years. One day they know who you are, and the next day they don't know who you are. It's that stark. It's an unfortunate, very frustrating thing. So I hope that, at least from my perspective and with your help and living through it myself, that I can apply that better to the community. Because once you live through something, you have a whole different vantage point. Thank you.
So first, we're sorry for your loss, and thank you for being so transparent. And I'm delighted that you see the applications. I think the simplicity of how do you go and meet someone for the first time that you've known your whole life long, because within this minute they're a different person than they were, and all the things you attribute to them are no longer in play. And having 5 simple things you can check through are a lot better than having 100. When we do in-home assessments, we take a holistic approach. You know, what's their mind, their body, their spirit, etc. But having learned of Dr. Maloney's work, we've added to that key questions to understand these factors as well. And those questions are included in your packet. And again, anyone can just email a message and we'll be sure to get them out. And you will find that those are super helpful as well. And I would encourage each of your disciplines to take a look at those and think about how they relate to your specific construct and constituents. And so we are out of time. I would like to thank the panel for all the work that is included in your packet. You will find how you can keep your brain strong to avoid Alzheimer's and dementia. You will find questions to assist you with the care of others. We would really like for everyone to take a moment and text yourself one action you will take to better learn about Alzheimer's and dementia, to help make your community and yourself more aware and more sensitized to this very difficult stage and condition. So thank you so much, Dr. Maloney, for all your work. We are here to continue to support you and see this further along. As we leave, is there one last thing you would like to say about the future of your work and how you plan to take this forward?
I appreciate what you said about quantifying what we're trying to do. My next project is to try to develop ways to measure well-being, and I have already developed a scale of Athomeness, which is a reliable and valid scale, but not yet for individuals living with Alzheimer's disease. So that's the next phase.
Yeah, one recommendation is that after living through it and working it through the city of Stratford is that to quantify the tipping point when that individual at home becomes unsafe to themselves or the other residents. I think it's extremely important because that helps people make decisions of movement, and it also helps from a safety perspective of the town. I think that's very critical.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We thank you all, and those who have been watching virtually, comment, let us know what you think, and this conversation will continue. So thank you, everyone. For those that are here, please help yourself to lunch. Come up and chat with Dr. Maloney. There's no rush, and Maria, the Senior Center coordinators, and Kathy, we'd love to hear your thoughts and any questions that you have. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for taking the time out.